Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan has secured a new mandate after a high turnout election, widely seen as a referendum on the country's future direction. The result was welcomed by Brussels, Kyiv and Washington, but immediately challenged by Moscow, which alleged, quote, gross violations after pro-Russian parties suffered a clear defeat. Joining us now is Sossi Tatikyan, director of the Yerevan Center of Foreign and Security Policy, to discuss it further. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you for this interview.
So, in terms of now the dust settling after these elections from the weekend, what do you make of this? What's the enduring message here of Pashinyan's victory and about his mandate?
In the reality, these elections were very important, not only in terms of Armenia's foreign and security policy orientation. Armenia is a post-conflict society. It's a society in transition. That's why it was a fertile ground for foreign interference, and that's what Russia was trying to do. It had invested more resources in intervening in Armenian elections than in previous countries, according to some reports, and it was using existential threat dilemmas. It was playing basically and manipulating deep fears in the Armenian society related to security and sovereignty, using the post-conflict situation. So there was a variety of narratives about what Armenia will face if it continues to aspire to European integration and reduce its dependency on Russia. So now, when elections are over, Russia is trying to contest the results, even if OSCE, ODIHR, and European Parliament monitoring missions have assessed it very positively, and using two basically means. The first one is hybrid warfare, cognitive warfare, playing with those existential threats and fear mongering. And the other one is economic pressure, economic sanctions on Armenian products, the threat to kick out Armenia from Eurasian Economic Union, as well as the threat of so-called Ukrainization. However, it's not likely that Russia is going to launch a military intervention against Armenia. So the threat for Ukrainization, which was voiced even by Russia's President Putin, is not very credible. However, economic sanctions may continue. And in this context, of course, it is very important for Armenia to see continuous support from the European Union to be able to mitigate those risks.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of those points, I just want to dive in on what you've just said also in terms of Russia. Now, the Russians themselves have said that there were gross violations of this election. They were not happy about this. At the same time, also, Putin himself, not too long ago, warned Armenia on this path to the European Union. At the same time, where are we now in reality? Do you sense Russia or the Kremlin will do something now? Will there be a different kind of relationship? I mean, Armenia has always kind of trodden these two paths in parallel, or must Armenia now choose, and how's Russia going to react?
The situation is that Armenia has adopted this policy of balancing and balanced foreign policy, meaning that basically it's applying multi-alignment, trying to diversify its strategic partnerships. So it is trying not to completely adopt a confrontational approach to Russia. However, it is Russia that is adopting confrontational approach to Armenia and using the opposition in Armenia against Armenian authorities. So now the sensitive issue now is that although the ruling party has secured victory and simple majority, and it is able to form a government and adopt government budget and adopt laws. However, it hasn't been able to secure constitutional absolute majority. This is rather a problem for Armenia's peace process with Azerbaijan than with Russia, because Azerbaijan has been raising a series of preconditions for finalizing the peace process with Armenia, and the most significant of it is the change of Armenia's constitution, where there is an indirect reference to Nagorno-Karabakh. So now Pashinyan's government will struggle with convening constitutional referendum, and the two opposition parties, or the three of them, because the third one is still not clear whether it has overcome the 4% of threshold, will, of course, create challenges and quite a toxic environment in the parliament that we have already seen in the previous parliament. And as for Russian economic coercion, there are two scenarios: whether Russia will continue them, or Russia will stop them, taking into account the results of the elections. And in fact, economic cooperation between Russia and Armenia's participation in Eurasian Economic Union, it's not beneficial only for Armenia, it's beneficial also for Russia. And of course, at one point, Armenia will have to choose between European Union and Eurasian Economic Union, because both of them are custom unions and they are incompatible. However, Armenia hasn't achieved the level of economic diversification yet to exit from Eurasian Economic Union, and maybe those economic sanctions will in fact be an additional motivation for Armenia to further diversify its exports, and they may actually backfire and accelerate Armenia's European integration.
You mentioned also Azerbaijan. Just let's talk about that for a moment, this peace process. And you mentioned that one of the things was that actually the Azerbaijanis, they want this constitution to be changed in Armenia. You're saying that Pashinyan doesn't have that full support. Also, in terms of concessions, how are the Armenian people view this on the ground, looking at Azerbaijan? Will they, let's say, follow the Prime Minister on this? Is this going to be one of his bigger challenges? How do you see this play out now after the dust is settled?
The results of the elections show that most of Armenian people support the peace process. They are tired of living in a conflict, and the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh is, of course, a sensitive issue, and perhaps it's the most polarizing issue in the Armenian society. At the same time, it's obvious that there is no any opportunity to recover Nagorno-Karabakh, so it is just a self-sabotaging issue for Armenia. That's why Armenia has actually refused from pursuing Nagorno-Karabakh issue still at the end of 2023, and stated that it's going to focus on its sovereignty and statehood. And that is exactly the issue that the opposition was trying to use during election campaign, and also trying to claim that if Pashinyan stays in power, he is going to make never-ending concessions to Azerbaijan. This narrative of concessions is quite controversial because, of course, there is no absolute justice in peace agreements, and there are provisions in the peace agreement that are controversial, but it's normal. There is no any peace agreement in the world that is 100% beneficial for any of the parties, and that is exactly what the opposition was manipulating and trying to claim that Armenia will lose its territorial integrity, that it will agree on the most maximalistic demands and preconditions by Azerbaijan that are actually quite moderated after US President Trump brokered the peace agreement in August last year. So the rhetoric by Azerbaijan was moderated and toned down, but what our opposition is doing, they are finding those most extreme statements that were ever voiced by Azerbaijan's President Aliyev, and they are doing this threat inflation and trying to do fear mongering, basically. It's interesting to mention the Turkish reaction to those elections, if you are interested, because Turkey changed its statement. Their first reaction was that they welcome Pashinyan's victory, and they expressed hope that it will contribute to the normalization of relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and thus Armenia and Turkey, because Turkey is basically conditioning the normalization of its relations with Armenia by Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. And then after a short period of time, they replaced the statement, urging Armenian Prime Minister to make bolder steps in order to normalize its relations with Azerbaijan. And this is part of this cognitive warfare that we see both by Russia and also Azerbaijan and Turkey. And those narratives are kind of synchronized and manipulated. Basically, Russia is using these kind of statements by Azerbaijan and Turkey for using the Armenian opposition and claiming that Armenia is constantly urged to make concessions, and this cycle is never ending.
So, I mean, many different threads, as you said, a society in transition, Armenia, but definitely one that many factors still to play, and we'll obviously be covering that. Look, thanks so much for all that. That was our guest here today, Sossi Tatikyan, Director from the Yerevan Center for Foreign and Security Policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here. There's much more coming up on TVP World, so don't go away. Bye-bye.